Hi, my beautiful family, and welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Today, my voice trembles, my hands can barely hold this microphone, because on a day when the world is supposed to be rejoicing, our hearts are shattered into a million pieces. Today is Easter Sunday, a day of light, of resurrection, of hope. But for us, it has become a day of mourning, because Holy Pope Francis, our shepherd, our spiritual father, our gentle guide, has left this earth. And oh, how it hurts. A man who carried not just the cross of the church, but the weight of the broken, the poor, the outcast. A man who prayed for us when we didn't even know how to pray for ourselves. A man whose every word was soaked in grace, is no longer with us. And isn't it just like God? To call home one of his most faithful servants on the very day his son rose from the grave, as if to say, "Well done, my child. Come home and rest." But for us here we weep. Our joy is wrapped in grief. Our hallelujahs are cracked with pain, because the world feels a little colder without him. So please, my beautiful family, wherever you are, bow your heads and join me in this prayer. Heavenly Father, we are broken, we are hurting, but even in our sorrow we thank you. Thank you for the life of Pope Francis, a soul so pure, so selfless, so filled with your light. Welcome him into heaven, Lord. Let him see the face of the one he loved and served so faithfully, and may his spirit continue to live in us, guiding us to love deeper, forgive quicker, and hold tighter to our faith. Amen. My family, I want you all to do one thing, just one thing. Flood the comments with amen. Let the heavens feel the echo of our love. Let this beautiful soul be honored by every heartbeat listening to this. And now, with tears streaming, with voices cracked by grief, and with hearts held tightly in God's hands, let's begin today's story, because even on the darkest day, love still shines. The rain pounded against the windows of Channing Wagner's small apartment, matching the thunderous beating of her heart as she stared at the medical papers spread across her kitchen table. The pediatric cardiologist's diagnosis was unmistakable. Isaiah's hypertrophic cardiomyopathy had progressed to a dangerous level. Her son needed surgery, expensive, specialized surgery their insurance wouldn't begin to cover. "Mom, is everything okay?" Channing quickly gathered the papers as Isaiah appeared in the doorway, his slender 9-year-old frame silhouetted by the hallway light. Even in the dimness, his striking grey-blue eyes, his father's eyes, reflected a wisdom beyond his years. "Everything's fine, baby," she lied, tucking the hospital forms into a folder. "What are you doing up so late?" "My chest feels funny again." He pressed a small hand against his sternum. "And Elijah's hogging all the blankets." Channing pulled him into her arms, inhaling the clean scent of his hair, seeking strength in his warmth. How many nights had she held these boys, her miracle twins, her salvation, and wondered how something so perfect could come from such heartbreak. "I'll get your medicine," she whispered, leading him to the kitchen where she measured the beta blocker that had managed his condition since diagnosis at age 5. Isaiah took it without complaint, accustomed to the routine they'd followed for years. Dr. Patel said, "I need special surgery now, don't I?" he asked, his direct gaze making evasion impossible, while his identical twin Elijah blazed through life. With boisterous energy, Isaiah noticed everything, felt everything deeply, just like she did. "Yes," she admitted softly, "but I promise you, I'm going to take care of everything." "We don't have enough money," he stated with the simple clarity of childhood. "That's why you were looking at those papers when you should be sleeping." A tear escaped despite her best efforts. "We have enough love, though," she countered, tracing her finger along his perfect cheekbone. "And sometimes love finds a way." After tucking Isaiah back into bed beside his sleeping brother, Channing returned to the kitchen and retrieved the medical forms. The surgeon's estimate stared back at her in cold, clinical language. $375,000 for the procedure, with additional costs for aftercare and ongoing treatment. Her teacher's health insurance would cover barely 20%. Even with her second job at Rosetta's Lounge and the modest income from her struggling dance studio, there was no way she could afford what her son needed. Lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating the faded photograph she kept tucked in her mirror frame. She'd meant to throw it away 1,000 times, but something always stopped her. Andrew White's laughing face looked back at her, his arm thrown casually around her shoulders, both of them young and deliriously in love on that spring day at Grant Park. The memory of his touch ghosted across her skin, making her shiver despite the apartment's persistent humidity. "Damn you, Andrew," she whispered, sinking onto a kitchen chair. "Damn you for still having this hold on me after all this time." Another blow had come yesterday. Notice that the building housing Dreams in Motion, her small dance studio serving Southside children, had been sold to developers. After 5 years of barely keeping the studio afloat, offering scholarships to neighborhood kids who otherwise would never experience dance, she now had 60 days to vacate. The universe was closing in from all sides, leaving her no choice but the one she'd sworn never to make. Channing unlocked her phone and pulled up the message from her sister. Found him. Charity Gala for Children's Medical Research. This Saturday at the Palmer House. Invitation attached. Of course, Andrew White would be at a gala, playing the benevolent businessman. The society pages occasionally featured him. Now the formidable CEO of White Enterprises since his father's semi-retirement. Always at some charity function, always with some elegant, appropriate woman on his arm, living the life that had been planned for him all along. Did he ever think of her? Did he ever wonder what had become of the girl who danced like her soul was on fire, the girl who had once believed his promises that they would build a different kind of life together? She'd met him during her sophomore year at Northwestern, where she'd earned a dance scholarship. The prestigious university had been a different world from her South Side neighborhood, a world of privilege where she'd always felt like an outsider, until the day Andrew White literally crashed into her life, sending her sprawling across the polished floor of the arts building. "I'm so sorry," he'd said, reaching down to help her up. When their hands touched, Channing felt something electric pass between them, something that made her forget the embarrassment of landing ungracefully in front of her classmates. His eyes had widened as he pulled her to her feet. "You're Channing Wagner," he'd said, recognition lighting his features. "I saw you dance at the Winter Showcase. You were magnificent." For 3 years, they'd built their dream together. Channing teaching dance to underprivileged children, while pursuing her own career, Andrew studying business, but secretly writing poetry that he shared only with her. They talked about changing the world together, she through arts education for disadvantaged youth, he by redirecting his family's wealth toward community investment. Then came the proposal, a sunset, a ring, promises of forever, followed by the elaborate wedding plans, driven largely by his mother's social aspirations. And finally, the morning that was supposed to begin their life together, the morning she stood in the church dressing room, radiantly happy despite her mother's absence, despite the whispers from his family's friends. The church had been filled with flowers, music, expectation, everything except the groom. No call, no explanation, just Channing in her wedding dress as the minutes stretched into hours, her heart breaking as the pitying glances from guests turned to awkward departures. Only her best friend Zora had stayed, holding her as she collapsed in the dressing room, wedding dress pooling around them like scattered dreams. A week later, the small velvet box had arrived by courier. Her engagement ring, accompanied by a cashier's check for $50,000 and a coldly typed note, "Mr. White regrets any inconvenience." As if their love had been nothing more than a cancelled dinner reservation, she'd torn the check to pieces and flushed it down the toilet. 2 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. Channing rose from the chair now, moving to the window to watch the storm rage outside. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 10 years building a Life without Andrew White, protecting her heart and her boys from the man who'd abandoned them all. Now Isaiah's heart condition would force her to seek out the very man who had broken hers. She glanced toward the tiny bedroom where her sons slept peacefully, unaware that their world was about to change. They had her warm brown skin and wild curls, but those eyes, those haunting blue-grey eyes, were completely their father's, as was Elijah's dimpled smile and Isaiah's thoughtful intensity. For years, she'd answered their questions about their father with gentle half-truths. He wasn't ready to be a daddy. He lived far away. Sometimes grown-ups couldn't stay together. Even when there was love, never had she told them the complete truth, that their father had left her standing alone on what should have been the happiest day of her life, that he had no idea they existed, that seeing him again was her greatest fear, and now her desperate necessity. As she smoothed Isaiah's hair back from his forehead, feeling the slight fever that worried her more than she let on, Channing made her decision. "Mommy's going to fix this," she whispered, pressing a kiss to each boy's forehead. "I promise." Returning to her room, she opened her closet and pushed aside her everyday clothes, the practical outfits of a working mother, to reveal the garment bag at the very back. With trembling fingers, she unzipped it, revealing the one designer dress she owned, a gift from her dance company days before she'd had to choose between her career and single motherhood. The midnight blue silk would still fit her dancer's frame. She knew she kept in shape teaching her classes, though exhaustion from working 2 jobs had hollowed her cheeks and shadowed her eyes in ways that makeup couldn't fully disguise. Would Andrew recognize her immediately? Would he see the woman he'd once claimed to love more than life itself? Or would she be just another face in the crowd, someone vaguely familiar from his past? It didn't matter. What mattered was Isaiah's heart, the literal heart that needed healing, not the metaphorical one that Andrew had shattered a decade ago. For Isaiah, she would swallow her pride. For Isaiah, she would face her deepest pain. For Isaiah, she would confront the only man she had ever truly loved, the man who had taught her that love wasn't always enough. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside Channing's heart, a strange calm settled. 10 years of running from her past had ended tonight. Whatever happened at that gala would change everything, for her boys, and for the man who had left her at the altar, never knowing he had walked away from not 1 life, but 3. Chapter 2. Fate's Cruel Reunion. The Palmer House ballroom glittered with chandeliers and wealth, a world where Andrew White moved with practiced ease but profound emptiness. At 34, he had everything his father had demanded of him: control of White Enterprises, the respect of Chicago's elite, and a fortune that grew by millions each quarter. Everything except meaning. "Andrew, you're brooding again." Victoria Ashford, his date for the evening, touched his arm with perfectly manicured fingers. The diamond tennis bracelet he'd sent her, a gift without sentiment, sparkled at her wrist. "It's a charity gala, not a funeral." He forced his lips into what passed for a smile these days. "Just thinking about the pediatric cardiology wing. My grandfather died of heart failure." "Oh?" Victoria's interest flickered briefly before drifting to the senator across the room. Andrew didn't bother elaborating. Few knew about the White family's carefully concealed medical history, the heart conditions that had plagued 3 generations, managed with private doctors and rigorous discretion. His father considered health problems a weakness, something to hide rather than address honestly. He moved toward the bar, nodding mechanically at those who acknowledged him. The mantle of power he'd inherited sat heavily on shoulders that had once carried a laughing dance student through the spray of Buckingham Fountain. The memory ambushed him like it always did. Channing's delighted squeals as water soaked them both, her body warm against his despite the chill. 10 years hadn't dulled the pain of what he'd done to her. "Scotch," Neat, he told the bartender, loosening his bow tie slightly. The first sip burned pleasantly when a ripple of attention near the entrance caught his eye. He turned, curious what newcomer had caused the subtle shift in the room's energy. The crystal tumbler nearly slipped from his fingers. Channing. She stood in the entrance, a vision in midnight blue silk that made her brown skin glow like burnished gold. Her hair, once worn in long braids, now framed her face in a crown of natural curls. But her posture, that dancer's elegant spine straight, chin lifted, hadn't changed at all. Time stopped. The room fell away. For one suspended moment, Andrew was 24 again, watching his future walk toward him. Then reality rushed back as Victoria appeared at his side, following his gaze. "Do you know her? She's certainly making an entrance." Andrew couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. Channing hadn't seen him yet. Her eyes scanned the room with purpose, not social interest. She looked both exactly the same and completely different. Still, breathtakingly beautiful, but with a maturity and gravity that spoke of a decade lived without him. "Excuse me," he murmured to Victoria, setting down his drink with a hand that wasn't quite steady. His feet moved of their own accord, drawn by the magnetic pull they'd always felt toward Channing Wagner. Halfway across the ballroom, he stopped dead. Two small boys had appeared beside Channing, dressed in identical suits that had clearly been carefully chosen for the occasion. One bounced nervously on his toes, while the other stood perfectly still, one hand pressed subtly against his chest, in a gesture Andrew recognized instantly from his own childhood. The unconscious movement of someone monitoring a heart rhythm that didn't feel quite right. Andrew's own heart slammed against his ribs, as his brain processed what his soul already knew. The boy's profile. That was his profile. Those eyes, those were his eyes. That dimple appearing as one twin smiled up at his mother. That was his smile, the one that had once made Channing tease him about his unfair genetic advantage. The truth hit him with physical force. Those were his sons, his sons. The math crashed through him like a wrecking ball. 10 years. The wedding that never happened. The children who would be 9, 10. Twins who had his eyes, his features, but Channing's warm coloring and curls. Children he'd never known existed. Children whose lives he'd missed entirely. The quieter boy, the one with his hand at his chest, suddenly looked directly at Andrew. As if sensing his stare, their eyes locked across the crowded room. The boy's expression shifted from curiosity to something like recognition, though that was impossible. He tugged at his mother's hand, saying something that made Channing finally turn in Andrew's direction. The moment their eyes met was cataclysmic. Andrew saw shock flash across her face, followed by a complex array of emotions, anger, pain, resignation, before her expression hardened into protective determination. She leaned down to speak to her sons, their sons, clearly considering retreat. Before Andrew could move, the quieter twin suddenly paled, his small body swaying. Channing's focus immediately shifted from Andrew to her son, her arms circling the boy's shoulders as she guided him to a nearby chair. The other twin's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by practiced concern as he reached into his mother's purse and retrieved what appeared to be medication. Andrew moved, without conscious thought, propelled by instinct rather than reason. He pushed past faceless guests, ignoring someone calling his name, his entire being focused on reaching the child, who was clearly in distress. "Can I help?" he asked as he approached, his voice steadier than the thundering in his chest. Channing looked up, surprise flashing across her face before she responded with unexpected directness. "He needs water and privacy." Without hesitation, Andrew signaled to a waiter for water, while guiding them toward a small anteroom off the main ballroom. Once inside, Channing helped the boy take what Andrew recognized as a beta blocker. The Same medication he'd secretly taken throughout his teens before more advanced treatments became available. Deep breaths, Isaiah, Channing coached softly, her hand rubbing circles on the boy's back. Just like Dr. Patel taught you. Is he okay? The other twin asked, hovering anxiously beside his brother. I'm fine, Elijah, the boy, Isaiah, managed between measured breaths. Just got too excited. Andrew stood frozen, a tumult of emotions rendering him speechless. The boy had his heart condition, the genetic weakness his father had hidden, the same arrhythmia that had haunted Andrew's childhood and influenced his devastating decision a decade ago. Isaiah and Elijah, he whispered, their names a prayer on his lips. All three turned to look at him, suddenly remembering his presence. Isaiah's eyes, exact replicas of his own, studied Andrew with uncanny perception. You look like us, he said simply, his breathing steadier now. Or we look like him, Elijah corrected, his gaze darting between his mother and Andrew with growing awareness. Are you our dad? The direct question, so innocent yet so monumental, struck Andrew like physical pain. Yes, he answered, unable to lie to those searching eyes. I believe I am. Andrew, Channing said, his name passing her lips for the first time in a decade. Just that. No greeting, no emotion, just acknowledgement. Your heart, Andrew said, to Isaiah, moving closer and kneeling before the boy. It's hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, isn't it? Surprise flickered across Channing's face. How did you? Because I have it too, Andrew said quietly, his eyes never leaving Isaiah's. So did my father and grandfather. It's genetic, something my family always kept secret. Understanding dawned in Channing's expression, quickly followed by anger. You knew about this condition in your family and never told me. I never told anyone, Andrew admitted, shame coloring his words. It was the white family way, hiding weaknesses, pretending to be perfect. He looked from Isaiah to Elijah, then back to Channing. If I had known, if I had any idea, the implications hung in the air between them, that his abandonment had not only left Channing alone with twins, but with a child bearing a potentially dangerous genetic condition she'd had no family history to prepare for. Isaiah, remarkably, composed for his age, studied Andrew with an intensity that seemed to look straight through to his soul. Mom says I need special surgery that costs too much money. Isaiah, Channing admonished gently, her protectiveness evident. It's true, the boy persisted with quiet dignity. And he's our dad, and he looks like he has money. He turned back to Andrew. Do you have money for my heart, doctor? The straightforward question from this small, serious version of himself shattered the last of Andrew's composure. Tears he hadn't shed in years welled in his eyes as he nodded. I do, he managed, his voice breaking. And it's yours. Anything. You need everything you need. Andrew, Channing began, wariness evident in her tone. Not for me, he interrupted, finally finding his voice as he rose to face her. I don't expect or deserve forgiveness, Channing. But for him, for them, please give me a chance to help, to explain, to do something, anything, to make up for 10 years of absence. Elijah stepped closer, studying Andrew with undisguised curiosity. Mom says you write poetry, do you still? The unexpected question, revealing Channing had shared at least some truth about him with their sons, caught Andrew off guard. Sometimes, he admitted, not as often as I should. I play music, Elijah announced with pride. Piano and violin and guitar. Isaiah draws, we're both good at math. Andrew drank in these details like a man dying of thirst, storing away each precious fact about the children whose lives he'd missed. Boys, Channing said, having collected herself. We should go. Isaiah needs rest. But we just found him, Elijah protested. Channing looked at Andrew, conflict evident in her expression. 10 years of anger and hurt battled with the practical reality of their son's medical needs. "Liberty Coffee on 53rd, she finally said. "Tomorrow at 10, we can talk then." Her gaze hardened. "Just you and me first, not the boys." Andrew nodded, understanding her protective instinct. "I'll be there." As they prepared to leave, Isaiah suddenly reached out, his small hand touching Andrew's arm. "Your heart got better?" he asked, his voice small but direct. "Yes," Andrew answered honestly. "With the right treatment, it did." "Mine will too, then," Isaiah decided with a certainty that squeezed Andrew's heart, "since I got it from you." The simple logic, the unearned trust in those familiar grey-blue eyes, broke something open inside Andrew. As Channing guided the boys toward the exit, he remained frozen in place, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had just discovered and what he had lost. He had sons. Sons. One with the same heart condition he'd spent his life hiding, all the moments he had missed. Their birth, first steps, first words, first days of school, flashed through his mind in a parade of loss. But more devastating was the knowledge that his family's culture of secrecy, the concealed medical history, the refusal to acknowledge weakness, had potentially endangered his own child. "Andrew, what's going on?" Victoria had appeared at his side, her curiosity evident. "Who was that woman, those children?" "My family," he said, the truth of it resonating through his entire being. That was my family. For the first time in a decade, purpose filled Andrew White's soul, something beyond profit margins and power plays. He would be there at Liberty, Coffee tomorrow, and every day after, for as long as Channing and their sons would allow, not just for the chance to know his children, but to ensure that Isaiah received the medical care Andrew's family pride and fear had denied him for years. The secrets of the past had created wounds in the present. Now he had to find the courage to heal them for his son's physical heart, and perhaps, if he was very lucky, for Channing's broken one as well. Chapter 3. Bitter Truths. Liberty Coffee on 53rd Street was worlds away from the sleek downtown establishments Andrew frequented. Its mismatched furniture and community bulletin boards, covered with local art, created an atmosphere entirely foreign to his current life. But it felt like Channing, authentic, unpretentious, alive with creativity. Andrew arrived 30 minutes early, too restless to wait in his penthouse. He chose a corner table with his back to the wall, ignoring curious glances from patrons who recognized him. A folder of medical records sat on the table before him, his own records, which he'd spent half the night retrieving from his private physician. At precisely 10 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. Channing stepped inside, her simple jeans and emerald sweater a stark contrast to last night's elegant gown, but no less breathtaking. She'd pulled her curls back into a loose bun, highlighting the graceful contours of her face. Their eyes locked across the room. Andrew rose instinctively, his heart racing as she approached with measured steps. "You came," he said softly, relief evident in his voice. "Not for you." Channing slid into the chair opposite him, her posture rigidly controlled. "For my son." "Our son," Andrew thought, but wisely remained silent as she placed a manila folder on the table between them. "Isaiah was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy when he was 5, she said without preamble, her voice clinical, despite the emotion shimmering beneath. "It's been manageable with medication until recently. His last echocardiogram showed dangerous progression that requires surgical intervention." She pushed the folder toward him. "These are his medical records and the specialist's recommendations. The procedure costs $375,000, with ongoing care estimated at $50,000 annually for at least 5 years. My insurance covers less than 20%. Andrew opened the folder with trembling hands, confronted with medical terminology that mirrored his own history with painful familiarity. A photograph was paper-clipped to the first page, Isaiah in a hospital gown, small and vulnerable against white sheets, monitoring equipment attached to his chest. The sight pierced Andrew's heart like physical pain. "I have the same condition," he said quietly, pushing his own medical folder toward her. "So did my father and grandfather. It's a genetic trait in the White family that we've hidden for generations." Channing stared at him, shock registering in her features as she opened his records. "You never told me about this." "I never told anyone," Andrew admitted, shame coloring his words. "In my family, medical conditions were considered weaknesses. My grandfather died of heart failure at 48. My father had surgery in Switzerland under a false name. I was diagnosed at 14 and sworn to secrecy." Understanding dawned in Channing's eyes. "That's why you disappeared for 3 weeks, during our second year together. A procedure at Mayo Clinic, disguised as a business trip," Andrew confirmed. "My father threatened to cut me off if I ever revealed our defect, as he called it." Channing's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "And this is supposed to explain why you left me at the altar. Some misguided attempt to spare me from your defective genes." "It was part of it," Andrew acknowledged, meeting her gaze directly. "When my father came to me the night before our wedding, he didn't just threaten your career and your mother's rehabilitation. He showed me my grandfather's autopsy report and told me I would be condemning any children we had to the same condition." "So, you decided for both of us," Channing said bitterly, "without giving me any choice in the matter." "I was terrified and ashamed," Andrew admitted. "Terrified of passing on this condition, ashamed of my own weakness in believing my father." He took a deep breath. "I convinced myself I was protecting you from a lifetime tied to someone who might not live to see 40, whose children might inherit a potentially fatal condition. And yet here we are." Channing gestured to Isaiah's medical files. "Your greatest fear realized despite your noble sacrifice." The justified anger in her voice made Andrew flinch. "I didn't know you were pregnant. By the time I realized what a catastrophic mistake I'd made, weeks had passed. I tried to find you, but you'd changed. Your number, moved apartments, I had to," Channing said, pain lacing her words. "Everyone knew I'd been left at the altar. The pitying looks were unbearable. I should have tried harder," Andrew acknowledged. "Should have fought for you instead of believing I was doing the right thing by staying away. You left me with $50,000 like I was some business transaction gone wrong. I didn't send that check," Andrew said firmly. "My father did. After I refused to go through with the wedding, I had a complete breakdown. I was sedated in our Lake Geneva house for days afterward. When I finally came to my senses, he informed me he'd handled the situation." Something in his voice, the raw pain perhaps, made Channing pause. She studied his face, as if searching for traces of the man she'd once loved. "When did you have your corrective surgery?" she asked, gesturing to his medical file. 3 years ago, a new procedure with significantly higher success rates than what was available when we were together." Andrew leaned forward, his voice intense. "The same procedure Isaiah needs. One with a 94% success rate at completely correcting the condition, rather than just managing symptoms." Channing's breath caught. "Dr. Patel mentioned an experimental procedure, but said it was only available at 3 centers nationwide with limited acceptance of patients." "The Townsend Protocol," Andrew nodded. "My foundation has been funding Dr. Townsend's research for the past 2 years. Isaiah would qualify immediately." "Your foundation?" Confusion flickered across Channing's face. "White Children's Cardiac Research Foundation," Andrew explained. "I established it after my own surgery. It's separate from White Enterprises. Something my father knows nothing about." "Why would you hide a charitable foundation from your father?" Pain flashed across Andrew's features. Because it's funded by my mother's inheritance, money she left specifically to me, not the family business. Money I promised to use for something meaningful. He hesitated before adding softly, "She died while we were together, Channing. Complications. From the same heart condition." This revelation clearly stunned Channing. "You never told me. You said she was traveling in Europe." "Another family lie," Andrew admitted. "Her death was listed as respiratory failure to hide the genetic connection. That's when I first learned how deeply my father would go to conceal our medical history." The weight of these revelations settled between them, years of secrets and pain laid bare in the humble coffee shop. "I need to understand something," Channing said after a moment, her voice softer but no less intense. "If you've known about this foundation and these treatments for 3 years, why didn't you try to find me then?" "I did," Andrew replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I hired investigators, checked dance companies across the country. You disappeared from the professional dance world completely. Pregnancy with twins tends to change career trajectories," Channing said dryly, "especially when you're doing it alone." "I understand your anger," Andrew said quietly. "You have every right to hate me for what I did. But please, don't let that stop you from accepting help for Isaiah. My foundation can arrange immediate treatment with Dr. Townsend, regardless of what happens between us." Channing's professional mask slipped, revealing the exhausted mother beneath. "Do you know what it's been like, watching him struggle to breathe, after playing with other children, measuring medications at 2 a.m. when his heart races too fast? Knowing that without intervention, his condition will only worsen?" "No," Andrew answered honestly. "I can't begin to imagine what you've endured alone, but I do know what it's like to live with this condition. The fear, the limitations, the constant awareness of your own mortality." His voice dropped lower. "And I know the guilt of believing you've passed it to your child." Silence fell between them, the cacophony of the coffee shop fading to background noise. "Isaiah has his pre-surgical consultation tomorrow," Channing finally said, her anger diminished but not gone. "Children's memorial at 3. Dr. Patel is expecting us." Hope surged through Andrew so intensely that for a moment he couldn't speak. "Us. The doctor needs your medical history," she clarified, her expression guarded. "And the boys, they haven't stopped asking questions since last night." "Thank you," Andrew managed, understanding the magnitude of what she was offering. "I'll be there." Channing gathered her purse, preparing to leave. "This doesn't mean I forgive you, Andrew. I'm doing this for Isaiah, not for you." "I understand," he said, though the thought of her never forgiving him was a pain he wasn't sure he could bear. "Channing!" She paused halfway out of her chair. "What are they like?" he asked softly, hungrily. "Beyond what I could see last night, who are they?" Something softened in Channing's expression. "Isaiah is sensitive, thoughtful. He feels everything deeply and notices everything. He loves drawing, chess, and classical music." A genuine smile touched her lips for the first time. "Elijah is his opposite in many ways. Boundless energy, fearless, always performing. He plays 3 instruments, all self-taught, and has never met a stranger." "Despite everything," Andrew said quietly, "you've raised extraordinary children." "They are extraordinary," Channing agreed, pride momentarily overcoming resentment. "Not because of you or me, but because of who they are." Andrew nodded, accepting both the rebuke and the truth within it. 3 o'clock tomorrow? "Don't be late," she warned, the implied history behind those words hanging between them. "Never again," he vowed, the promise weighted with a decade of regret. As she turned to leave, Andrew called after her softly, "Channing, there's something else you should know." She turned back, wariness returning to her features. "After my surgery, 3 years ago, I learned the truth about my father's threats from back then. His expression hardened. Your mother eventually got help through a program his company actually supports. Your dance career would have been fine. The companies he claimed influence over weren't even ones he had connections with. Bitterness tinged his voice. His threats were empty manipulation, a test of my loyalty to the family over you. A test I failed in the worst possible way, by believing him. The pain that flashed across Channing's face was quickly masked, but not before Andrew saw the wound. His words reopened. Without responding, she turned and walked out of the coffee shop, her dancer's posture rigid with renewed hurt. Andrew remained at the table, Isaiah's medical file open before him, his heart, both heavier and lighter than it had been in 10 years. He had sons, brilliant, talented sons with Channing's strength in his eyes. One of them had inherited his defective heart. Both had grown up without him. He would spend the rest of his life trying to make up for his absence, knowing he never fully could. But he would start by ensuring Isaiah received the treatment he himself had been denied for so many years. A chance to live without the shadow of a failing heart. For the first time in a decade, purpose filled Andrew White's soul. He would be there at 3 o'clock, and every day after, for as long as Channing and their sons would allow. Chapter 4. Delicate Beginnings. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy presents differently across patients, even within families, Dr. Patel explained, directing her comments equally to both parents as they sat in the consultation room. Isaiah's case shows significant thickening of the ventricular wall, particularly concerning given his young age. Andrew nodded, his attention fully focused on the echocardiogram images displayed on the monitor. My condition presented similarly at 14, though the interventricular septum involvement was less pronounced. Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose slightly. You're familiar with cardiac imaging, Mr. White? Unfortunately, yes. Andrew opened his medical file, presenting his own records. 3 generations of this condition in my family. I underwent the Townsend protocol 3 years ago at Mayo Clinic. The doctor's expression shifted from professional interest to excitement. The Townsend protocol has shown remarkable results in adult patients. We've been attempting to secure Isaiah's eligibility, but the waiting list for pediatric candidates is substantial. I can arrange immediate evaluation, Andrew stated, his tone measured despite the emotion beneath. Dr. Townsend's research foundation has a pediatric trial beginning next month. Given the genetic confirmation and progressive symptoms, Isaiah would qualify immediately. Channing, who had been silently observing this exchange, finally spoke. What are the risks compared to conventional surgery? Andrew appreciated her directness. While he could provide financial access, this was still her decision as the parent, who had raised Isaiah from birth. Significantly reduced, Andrew replied, deferring to Dr. Patel for confirmation. The minimally invasive approach eliminates the need for sternotomy, reducing recovery time and complications by approximately 60%. Dr. Patel nodded, impressed by his knowledge. Mr. White is correct. The protocol would offer Isaiah his best chance at not just managing, but potentially correcting the structural abnormality. For the next 30 minutes, they reviewed treatment options, surgical approaches, and recovery expectations. Andrew asked targeted questions reflecting years of personal research, while Channing focused on practical concerns about Isaiah's daily life during recovery. I'm approving referral to Dr. Townsend's team, Dr. Patel concluded, clearly pleased with this unexpected development. Mr. White, if you can facilitate this connection, we could potentially schedule evaluation within 2 weeks. I'll make the calls today, Andrew confirmed. As they exited the consultation room, Channing glanced at Andrew with guarded appreciation. You've clearly done your research. Living with this condition gave me motivation, he replied simply. Discovering my son, has it doubled that commitment? The waiting area came into view, where Zora sat between the twins, Elijah animatedly describing something while Isaiah sketched in a notebook. Upon seeing them, both boys straightened attentively. "Is everything okay with my heart?" Isaiah asked. Directly as they approached, Channing knelt before her son, maintaining her practice of honesty appropriately tailored to his age. "Dr. Patel thinks you're a good candidate for a special procedure that could help fix the problem, not just treat the symptoms, like a permanent fix." Isaiah's perceptive eyes widened. "So I wouldn't need medicine forever." "That's the goal," Andrew interjected carefully, still unsure of his place in this conversation. Isaiah turned to him with unexpected directness. "You had this surgery?" 3 years ago, Andrew confirmed. "The same doctor who would perform yours." "Did it hurt?" The simple question, one that adults rarely thought to ask, caught Andrew off guard with its authenticity. "Yes," he answered honestly, "for a little while. But much less than I expected, and the relief afterward made it worthwhile." Isaiah nodded, absorbing this information with remarkable composure. "I'm not afraid of pain. I just want to run without my chest hurting." The simple desire, so fundamental yet denied to his son, pierced Andrew's heart. Before he could respond, Elijah interrupted with characteristic enthusiasm. "Can we go to lunch together? Mom said maybe we could if the appointment went okay." All eyes turned to Channing, who hesitated before nodding. "I suppose that would be all right." The small Italian restaurant near the hospital provided neutral territory. For this fragile new family configuration, Zora had departed with obvious reluctance, extracting Andrew's promise to have them home by 4. "Mom says you work in a really tall building," Elijah began, barely glancing at his menu. "Do you have to climb stairs all day?" "There are elevators," Andrew replied, smiling despite his nervousness, "though I do have an office on the 42nd floor." "That's 4 times 10 plus 2, Isaiah observed quietly. "A lot of multiplication. Tables." "You enjoy mathematics?" Andrew asked, noting the precision in the observation. Isaiah nodded. "Numbers make sense. They follow rules." "Unlike people," Andrew acknowledged, recognizing the sentiment from his own childhood. A small smile flickered across Isaiah's face, the first directed at him, creating a connection more valuable than any business deal Andrew had ever closed. Throughout lunch, Andrew observed the distinct personalities of his sons beyond the superficial quiet, loud dichotomy. Isaiah's apparent reserve masked a keen, analytical mind and artistic sensibility, evident in the detailed sketches in his notebook. Elijah's exuberance contained surprising depth, particularly when describing music theory beyond what most adults comprehended. "You compose your own music?" Andrew asked, genuinely impressed when Elijah described a piece he was writing. "Mostly for piano, but I'm learning violin orchestration," Elijah confirmed without pretense. "Mom's studio doesn't have a good piano, though." "Elijah," Channing cautioned, clearly uncomfortable with the implied request. "I have my mother's baby grand," Andrew said, carefully. "It hasn't been played in years." The revelation about his mother created a momentary silence. Channing's expression softened slightly, recognizing the significance of the offer. As lunch concluded, Andrew accompanied them to the parking garage, the brief time together simultaneously feeling too short and overwhelmingly significant. "Thank you," he said to Channing as the boys climbed into her car. "For today." She studied him for a moment. "You were good with them, better than I expected." "They're extraordinary children," Andrew replied. "That's your doing, not mine." "We'll see about Dr. Townsend's evaluation," she said pragmatically. "I appreciate your help with that. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, the first step on a very long road." After they departed, Andrew cancelled his remaining appointments and drove directly to White Enterprises. His father's surprise at the unscheduled interruption quickly transformed to calculated observation as Andrew entered the expansive corner office. "I met my sons yesterday," Andrew stated without preamble, "including Isaiah, who has the family heart condition you claimed wasn't worth mentioning to the woman I planned to marry." Harrison White's expression remained impassive. "So she kept them. Interesting leverage strategy." "This isn't about leverage," Andrew replied, disgust mounting at his father's immediate calculation. "It's about a child, your grandson, who needs surgery because of genetic traits our family deliberately concealed." "Medical privacy is our prerogative," Harrison replied dismissively. "The White family doesn't broadcast its challenges." "No, it just uses them as manipulation tactics," Andrew countered. "You knew about my relationship with Channing for 3 years. You waited until the night before our wedding to suddenly develop concern about genetic implications. I was protecting the family interests." "You were testing my loyalty," Andrew corrected, "and I failed Channing by choosing fear over love." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you want?" "Complete records of all White family medical history," Andrew stated firmly, "and your non-interference with Isaiah's treatment through my foundation." "Your foundation?" "The one funded by Mother's inheritance," Andrew clarified, satisfaction flickering as surprise registered on his father's face. "The money you couldn't control." For the first time in his adult life, Andrew left his father's office without being dismissed, his priority finally clear. Not the White family legacy, but the 2 boys who deserved more than secrets and manipulation as their inheritance. Chapter 5. Building Bridges. 2 weeks after Isaiah's consultation, Channing received the call she'd been waiting for. Dr. Townsend's team had reviewed Isaiah's case and accepted him into the pediatric trial. Surgery was scheduled for the following month, with pre-surgical testing to begin immediately. "They've never accepted a patient this quickly," Dr. Patel told her during their follow-up appointment. "Mr. White's foundation must have significant influence with the research team." Channing nodded, conflicted emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. Andrew had been true to his word, arranging everything with quiet efficiency while respecting her authority over final decisions. But his growing presence in their lives created complications she hadn't anticipated, not least the twins' rapidly developing attachment to their newfound father. "Mom, look what Dad brought!" Elijah's excited voice greeted her as she arrived. At Zora's apartment that evening, on the coffee table sat a professional-quality digital keyboard, complete with recording equipment and composition software. Andrew stood awkwardly in the corner of the small living room, clearly unsure of his welcome. "I should have consulted you first," he acknowledged, noting her expression. But Elijah mentioned his composition was limited by access to proper equipment. Rather than the irritation she might have felt weeks ago, Channing found herself appreciating his thoughtfulness. The gift was practical, educational, and directly connected to Elijah's passion. Not an extravagance meant to impress, but a tool to nurture talent. "It's fine," she conceded, surprising herself. "Thank you." Isaiah appeared from the bedroom, clutching a sketchbook. "Dad brought me something too," he said softly, opening the book to reveal professional-grade drawing materials arranged in a wooden case. "For my heart journal." "Heart journal?" Channing questioned, unfamiliar with the term. "It's something that helped me through my own treatment," Andrew explained. "Recording physical sensations, emotions, and questions through art rather than just words. The cardiopsychologist at Mayo recommended it for processing medical experiences." The thoughtfulness of the gift, connecting to Isaiah's artistic inclinations, while addressing his medical journey, caught Channing off guard. This wasn't the impulsive, materialistic giving she had expected from Andrew, but something more considered and genuinely supportive. "Can Dad stay for dinner?" Elijah asked hopefully. "Aunt Zora's making lasagna." Zora appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression making clear she hadn't extended the invitation. "There's plenty," she said neutrally, her initial hostility toward Andrew having moderated after witnessing his consistent involvement with her nephews. "I wouldn't want to impose," Andrew began, though his eyes betrayed his desire to accept. "Stay," Channing found herself saying. "We should discuss the pre-surgical schedule anyway." Dinner revealed a side of Andrew that Channing had nearly forgotten: his ability to engage in genuine conversation, to listen with undivided attention. He asked Elijah thoughtful questions about his composition techniques, discussed different pencil grades with Isaiah, and respectfully addressed Zora's polite but pointed inquiries about his future intentions. "Mum, can we show Dad my heart monitor?" "The data?" Isaiah asked as they cleared the dishes. "He might understand the patterns." In Isaiah's bedroom, Andrew studied the cardiac monitoring app on Channing's tablet, his expression growing increasingly troubled as he swiped through weeks of recorded data. "These arrhythmia patterns," he said quietly, ensuring the twins couldn't overhear from the living room. "They're accelerating more rapidly than I'd expect." "Dr. Patel said the same," Channing admitted, her voice tight with carefully controlled fear. "That's why the surgery timeline is aggressive." Andrew nodded, his expertise evident in his focused analysis. "The Townsend protocol should address the structural issues before the electrical patterns become more problematic." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I had similar progression at 17. The conventional treatments nearly came too late." The admission, calm but weighted with remembered fear, created unexpected intimacy between them. This wasn't theoretical medical discussion, but shared parental concern, deepened by Andrew's personal experience with the very condition threatening their son. "Were you afraid?" she asked softly. "Terrified," he admitted, "but I had no one who understood. Isaiah has both of us." The simple statement, acknowledging their shared responsibility despite their complicated past, touched something deep within Channing. For the first time, she truly saw the value of Andrew's presence in Isaiah's journey beyond financial resources. As Andrew prepared to leave, the twins insisted on walking him to his car. Through the window, Channing watched their animated conversation, struck by how naturally they had incorporated him into their lives. Elijah demonstrated wild air piano gestures, while Isaiah spoke with unusual animation, both boys absorbing their father's undivided attention like plants turning towards sunlight. When they returned, Isaiah headed straight to his room while Elijah lingered, uncharacteristically serious. "Mom, why didn't you tell us Dad knows about music and drawing?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "You always said he was just a businessman?" The innocent question revealed how she had unintentionally reduced Andrew to a simplified absence in their lives rather than a complex person with dimensions that might have connected to her sons. "Sometimes adults make mistakes when they're hurt," she answered carefully. "I should have shared more about who your father really was." Later that night, as Channing packed Isaiah's medication for the next day's stress test, her phone chimed. With a text from Andrew, Isaiah mentioned being nervous about tomorrow's test. "Attached is the relaxation technique that helped me through similar procedures, only if you think it useful." The attached audio file contained Andrew's voice guiding a visualization specifically designed for cardiac patients, clearly recorded, especially for Isaiah rather than forwarded from some generic resource. The effort behind this gesture, personal, thoughtful, directly relevant to their son's needs, continued Andrew's pattern of support that went beyond checkbook solutions. Despite her lingering wariness, Channing found herself increasingly acknowledging that the man Andrew had become differed significantly from both the boy who had abandoned her and the corporate automaton she had imagined during their years apart. 3 days later, disaster struck during the stress test. Isaiah's cardiac response exceeded safety parameters, requiring immediate intervention. When Channing arrived at the hospital after receiving the emergency call, she found Andrew already there. He had been listed as secondary contact on Isaiah's medical forms. Premature ventricular contractions during exertion, he explained, his business suit rumpled from clearly having rushed from a meeting. They've stabilized him with medication, but it confirms the need to accelerate the surgical timeline. The technical terms from Andrew matched what the doctors had told her, but his presence, solid, informed, immediately responsive to their son's crisis, provided unexpected comfort. Together, they entered Isaiah's treatment room, where their son lay small and pale against hospital sheets, monitoring equipment tracking each heartbeat. "Both of you came," Isaiah observed quietly, relief evident in his voice. "Oh, of course we did," they answered in unintentional unison, creating a moment of startled acknowledgement between them. Dr. Townsend arrived shortly thereafter, having flown in specifically to assess Isaiah's condition. "Based on today's event, I recommend we move surgery forward to next week," he concluded, after examining both Isaiah and his test results. "The structural intervention needs to happen before these arrhythmias become more resistant to medication." Andrew asked targeted, knowledgeable questions, while Channing focused on practical recovery concerns. Their complementary approaches, his technical understanding and her intimate knowledge of Isaiah's daily needs, created a comprehensive consultation that visibly impressed the specialist. "You have excellent advocates," Dr. Townsend told Isaiah, with genuine approval. Later, as they walked to the parking garage, Channing found herself unexpectedly emotional. "Thank you for being here today," she said, the words difficult but necessary. "Your understanding of the condition helped me ask better questions. I only wish I'd been here sooner," Andrew replied, regret evident in his voice. "For all of it, the simple acknowledgement, free from excuses or qualification, continued his pattern of accepting responsibility without expectation of forgiveness." Before Channing could respond, her phone rang, Dreams in Motion's landlord, informing her that despite their agreement, the building needed to be vacated within 30 days due to accelerated demolition plans. "This can't be happening," she said after ending the call, calculation and worry clear on her face. "With Isaiah's surgery and the medical bills, I can't afford to relocate the studio on such short notice." Andrew remained silent, clearly processing options while being careful not to overstep. "The community center on Oakwood," he finally suggested, his tone deliberately neutral. "White Enterprises owns it. It's been vacant since the previous tenant's lease expired." "I can't afford commercial rates right now," Channing admitted, the confession clearly difficult for her independent spirit. "The foundation I've established includes an arts education initiative," Andrew replied carefully. "It offers subsidized space to qualifying programs. Dreams in Motion would easily meet the criteria." Channing studied him, searching for manipulation and finding only sincere desire to help. "This isn't charity. It's investment in a proven program with established community impact," he countered. "The Foundation's board, which doesn't include me, makes final approval decisions based on merit, not personal connection." His approach, creating proper distance while offering legitimate assistance, respected her professional dignity while addressing a genuine need. Rather than imposing solutions or expecting gratitude, he had presented an option that honored her program's actual value. "I'll submit an application," she conceded, her practical nature acknowledging the opportunity despite her lingering wariness. When they reached her car, Andrew hesitated before speaking. Isaiah's surgery is going to require significant recovery. In time, I've arranged to clear my schedule for the entire month. I can handle overnight hospital shifts if that would help you maintain the studio transition. The offer, specific, practical support rather than vague promises, demonstrated understanding of her dual responsibilities as both mother and professional. Not asking her to choose between her child and her career, but offering partnership that acknowledged both priorities. That would be helpful, she admitted, the simple statement representing significant progress in their cautious co-parenting relationship. As she drove away, Channing found herself increasingly unable to maintain the anger that had sustained her for a decade. The man who had abandoned her still deserved her fury, but the father who had stepped fully into responsibility for their sons, arranging medical care, providing thoughtful support, respecting her authority, was becoming increasingly difficult. To reject the contradiction created uncomfortable cognitive dissonance. Were they the same person? Could she accept Andrew as her son's father while protecting herself from the man who had broken her heart? And most troubling, was her heart still vulnerable to him at all? Chapter 6. The Storm. Within 3 days before Isaiah's scheduled surgery, Channing found him huddled in bed at 2 a.m., his breathing rapid and shallow. "It's not my heart," he whispered when she rushed to check his monitor. "I keep having nightmares about the surgery." Channing held him close, her own anxiety carefully masked behind maternal reassurance. Despite Dr. Townsend's excellent reputation and Andrew's personal success with the procedure, the reality of her son facing open-heart surgery created a terror unlike anything she'd experienced. "Do you think Dad could come over?" Isaiah asked, hesitantly. "He knows what it feels like." The simple request revealed how quickly Andrew had become an essential support for their son. Without hesitation, Channing called him, expecting to leave a message at this hour. Andrew answered on the second ring. "Is Isaiah okay?" His immediate concern rather than confusion at the late call spoke volumes. When he arrived, 30 minutes later, still in sweatpants and a Harvard t-shirt, his hair rumpled from sleep, Channing was struck by how different he looked from the polished executive she'd first encountered at the gala. This version of Andrew, unguarded, focused entirely on their son's needs, seemed more authentic than the corporate facade he typically maintained. In Isaiah's room, Andrew sat on the edge of the bed and spoke with quiet honesty about his own pre-surgical fears. "The night before my procedure, I was so scared, I actually threw up twice," he admitted, the vulnerability in his confession clearly resonating with Isaiah. "Being afraid doesn't mean you're not brave. It means you understand what's happening." From the doorway, Channing watched as Andrew showed Isaiah the small surgical scar on his chest, explaining each step of the procedure in age-appropriate but honest terms. Not minimizing the challenges, but emphasizing the outcome. A heart that could keep up with his mind and spirit. "Can I see your bigger scar?" Isaiah asked, referring to Andrew's earlier, more invasive surgery. Andrew hesitated, glancing at Channing for permission before lifting his shirt to reveal the substantial sternotomy scar from his teenage procedure. "This is why your surgery is different," he explained. "The new technique Dr. Townsend developed means you won't have this kind of scar because you helped pay for his research." Isaiah's perceptiveness continued to surprise them both. "Partly," Andrew acknowledged. "After my surgery, I wanted to help make sure other people with our condition had better options." The conversation shifted to practical coping strategies, with Andrew teaching Isaiah breathing techniques specifically designed for cardiac patients. Their shared medical experience created a unique bond that Channing, despite all her maternal devotion, couldn't provide. When Isaiah finally drifted back to sleep, Andrew followed Channing to the kitchen, the awkwardness between them softened by their shared concern. "Thank you for coming," she said, setting a cup of tea before him. He needed that specific reassurance. "I needed it too at his age," Andrew replied, but there was no one who understood. After a pause, he added, "My father told me to man up about the surgery, said showing fear was a weakness." The glimpse into his childhood, the emotional neglect beneath the privilege, offered Channing new perspective on the man Andrew had been when they met. Someone struggling between authentic self-expression and toxic family expectations. "You're not your father," she observed quietly. Andrew's expression revealed how deeply those 4 words affected him. "I'm trying not to be," he admitted. "Every day." Their conversation continued past dawn, initially focused on Isaiah's surgery, but gradually expanding to include the past decade of their separate lives. Andrew described his mother's death and his subsequent depression, while Channing shared the challenges of establishing her dance studio while raising twins alone. As morning light filled the apartment, Elijah emerged from his room, surprised, but visibly pleased to find his father at their breakfast table. "Are you staying for pancakes?" he asked hopefully. "Actually," Channing said, surprising herself, "your father is taking us all to the aquarium today." Andrew's startled expression quickly transformed to appreciation as he understood her intention, giving Isaiah positive distraction before tomorrow's pre-surgical preparation. The day unfolded with unexpected normalcy, the 4 of them navigating exhibits like any family, Elijah racing ahead to each new display, Isaiah methodically reading every informational plaque, Andrew and Channing falling into natural coordination of snacks, rest breaks, and educational engagement. During a quiet moment watching jellyfish undulate in blue-lit tanks, Andrew spoke softly. "This is what I imagined, before everything went wrong, just ordinary days with you and our children." The simple honesty of his statement, free from manipulation or expectation, touched something Channing had protected for a decade. Before she could respond, Isaiah called them over to show them spotted eagle rays, the moment passing, but not forgotten. That evening, as Andrew prepared to leave after dinner, Elijah announced he'd composed a piece for Isaiah's recovery. The melody he played on his keyboard, remarkably sophisticated for a 9-year-old, brought tears to Channing's eyes, a musical representation of brotherly love and hope. Andrew, visibly moved, suggested recording the composition to play during Isaiah's recovery. His technical knowledge, combined with genuine appreciation for Elijah's talent, created another unexpected moment of family connection. As the twins prepared for bed, Andrew received an email that darkened his expression. "What's wrong?" Channing asked, recognizing genuine concern beneath his attempt at composure. "The community center application for Dreams in Motion," he replied carefully. "A board member has flagged it for special review due to conflict of interest concerns." "Because of our connection," Channing surmised. Andrew nodded, frustration evident. "The board member is Mason Reynolds, my father's former college roommate." The implications were clear, Harrison White's influence extending beyond direct contact. "I'll find another solution," Channing said with determined practicality, though. The timing couldn't have been worse, with Isaiah's surgery looming. "No!" Andrew countered firmly. "The Foundation has specific anti-interference bylaws precisely because I anticipated this sort of manipulation. I'll address it through proper channels." His response, professional rather than reactionary, respecting established procedures rather than leveraging personal power, demonstrated significant maturity. Not the impulsive young man who had once fled from conflict, but someone who understood systemic approaches to ethical challenges. After the twins were asleep, Andrew lingered at the door, the weight of tomorrow's hospital admission creating unspoken tension. I'm afraid too, Channing confessed, finally acknowledging her own fear about Isaiah's surgery. Without thought, she reached for Andrew's hand, seeking the specific comfort of shared parental concern. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and steady, the simple contact conveying mutual understanding that transcended their complicated history. "We'll get through this," he promised, "all of us together." As he reluctantly released her hand and departed, Channing realized the wall she had maintained between co-parenting cooperation and emotional connection were becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. The man who had stepped fully into fatherhood, who understood her children in ways that sometimes surprised even her, who respected her authority while offering genuine partnership, this man was becoming increasingly difficult to keep at emotional arm's length. The realization was terrifying. And yet, watching Isaiah sleep peacefully after weeks of anxiety, knowing Andrew had provided comfort she alone could not, Channing acknowledged that some risks might be worth taking, not for herself, but for the well-being of the children they had created together. Chapter 7. Breaking point. Isaiah's surgery began at 7:42 a.m. on a crisp autumn morning. As the medical team wheeled him toward the operating theater, Andrew and Channing walked alongside until they reached the designated separation point. "Remember what we practiced," Andrew told Isaiah, his voice steady despite the fear Channing could see in his eyes. "4 counts in, 6 counts out." Isaiah nodded bravely, his small hand squeezing each of their fingers before he disappeared through the double doors. The waiting room became their shared purgatory. Elijah sat between them, alternately playing games on Andrew's tablet and dozing against his father's shoulder. Zora brought coffee and remained for moral support, her initial hostility toward Andrew notably absent as she witnessed his genuine distress over Isaiah's surgery. 4 hours into the procedure, Andrew's phone buzzed with an incoming email. His sharp intake of breath drew Channing's attention. "What is it?" she asked, immediately concerned. Andrew handed her the phone wordlessly. On the screen was a society blog headline: "White Air's secret family revealed, love children discovered after decade of silence." Beneath the sensationalized text were photos of Andrew with the twins at the aquarium, their identical profiles, unmistakably connecting them to the White lineage. "How?" Channing whispered, horror mounting as she scrolled through the article that speculated about her relationship with Andrew and the twins' legitimacy. "My father," Andrew replied, controlled, fury evident in his voice. "The timing is too precise to be coincidence. He's punishing me for prioritizing Isaiah's treatment over company obligations." As if confirming his suspicion, Andrew's phone rang with his father's private number. Excusing himself, he stepped into the hallway to take the call, returning minutes later with rigid composure that barely contained his anger. "He claims no responsibility, but offers assistance with media management, conditional on my return to White Enterprises leadership," Andrew explained, disgust evident in his tone. "Apparently, my distraction with personal matters is affecting company valuation." Before Channing could respond, Dr. Townsend appeared in surgical scrubs, his expression professionally neutral. "The procedure is complete," he announced. "Isaiah is stable and being transferred to recovery." The collective release of tension was palpable, though Dr. Townsend's measured tone indicated complications. "We encountered more extensive structural abnormalities than the imaging suggested," he explained. "Similar to your case, Mr. White, but more pronounced given Isaiah's age of presentation." Andrew immediately asked technical questions about surgical adaptations, while Channing focused on recovery implications. Their complementary concerns created a comprehensive understanding of their son's condition. "He's asking for both of you," the surgeon concluded. "I'll have a nurse escort you to recovery once he's settled." As Dr. Townsend departed, Andrew's phone began ringing incessantly with media inquiries. The hospital's administrative office called Channing simultaneously, concerned about potential press intrusion affecting patient privacy. "This is exactly what Isaiah doesn't need during critical recovery," she said, fighting to maintain composure despite mounting anxiety. "I'll handle it," Andrew promised, already dialing his PR team. "We'll establish a security protocol and media blackout." His immediate practical response, focused on Isaiah's well-being rather than reputation management, further demonstrated his priorities. Not the image-conscious heir apparent Channing had once known, but a father primarily concerned with protecting his vulnerable child. In recovery, Isaiah appeared smaller and more fragile than ever against white hospital sheets. Monitoring equipment tracked his vital signs, while tubes and wires created a medical cocoon around his small body. "Mom? Dad?" His voice was barely a whisper as his eyes fluttered open. "We're right here, baby," Channing assured him carefully. Taking his hand, "Both of us," Andrew confirmed from the opposite side of the bed. "The surgery went very well." Isaiah managed a weak smile before drifting back to sleep, his parents maintaining their vigil on either side. When Elijah was allowed to visit briefly, his usual exuberance subdued by the clinical environment, he played his compositions softly on a small keyboard he'd brought, the gentle melody soothing his twin in ways medicine couldn't measure. The family moment was shattered when Harrison White arrived unannounced, using his considerable influence to bypass hospital security protocols. His commanding presence, tailored suit, imperious manner, filled the small recovery room with unwelcome tension. "So these are my grandsons," he observed coolly, studying the twins with analytical detachment. "The younger one has the unfortunate white heart, I understand." "Isaiah," Andrew corrected firmly. "His name is Isaiah, and Elijah is the elder by 12 minutes. Harrison ignored the correction, addressing Channing directly. "Ms. Wagner, I believe we have mutual interests to discuss regarding these children and their future connection to the White family." "This isn't the time or place," Andrew interjected, positioning himself protectively between his father and his family. "On the contrary," Harrison countered smoothly, "with the media situation developing, timing is essential for damage control." "Damage?" Elijah questioned, his perceptiveness catching the negative implication. "Are we damage?" The innocent question, from a child's perspective, created momentary silence, highlighting the callousness of Harrison's approach. "You misunderstand," Harrison replied with practiced diplomacy. "I'm simply concerned about your well-being amid unwanted publicity." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have leaked those photos to create that publicity," Andrew stated coldly, the accusation direct and unambiguous. Harrison's expression hardened. "Careful with unfounded allegations, Andrew, particularly when White Enterprises resources are funding this very specialized medical care." "My foundation is funding Isaiah's treatment," Andrew corrected, "using my mother's inheritance, money you never controlled." The tension between father and son escalated until Isaiah's heart monitor registered increased stress response, triggering a nursing intervention that required all visitors except immediate family to leave. "This discussion isn't concluded," Harrison warned as he departed. The following morning, while Channing remained at the hospital with Isaiah, Andrew attended an emergency board meeting at White Enterprises. Dressed in surgical scrubs rather than his usual business attire, having spent the night in Isaiah's room, he entered the boardroom with uncharacteristic disregard for corporate protocol. "I'll be brief," he announced to the assembled executives and board members. "Effective immediately, I'm resigning from all operational roles within White Enterprises." Murmurs of shock rippled through the room as Harrison rose from his chair at the head of the table. "Don't be dramatic, Andrew. Your temporary family situation doesn't necessitate career suicide." "This isn't temporary," Andrew replied with calm certainty. Isaiah, Elijah, and Channing are my family, my permanent priority family. You have obligations to this company and the white legacy, Harrison countered, anger breaking through his controlled facade. I have obligations to my children, Andrew corrected, one of whom is currently recovering from heart surgery made necessary by the genetic condition our family concealed for generations. He placed a formal envelope on the conference table. My resignation letter, along with documentation, transferring my ownership shares to the employee pension fund rather than back to family control. Harrison's face darkened with fury. You would throw away everything we've built for that dance teacher and her, my sons, Andrew interrupted with quiet intensity. And yes, without hesitation. As Andrew turned to leave, Harrison issued his final threat. You walk out that door, you lose everything, your position, your inheritance, your access to family resources. Andrew paused at the threshold, turning back with unexpected serenity. I spent 10 years losing what actually mattered while gaining everything that didn't. I'm done confusing the two. Returning to the hospital, Andrew found Channing in the hallway outside Isaiah's room, tension evident in her posture. What's wrong? He asked immediately. A courier delivered this, she replied, handing him an envelope bearing the White Enterprises logo. Inside was a formal letter terminating the Foundation's support for Dreams in Motion's relocation, along with documentation suspending Isaiah's participation in Dr. Townsend's program, citing irregularities in application process. He's targeting the children, Channing said, disbelief and anger mingling in her voice, using Isaiah's medical care as leverage. Andrew's expression reflected momentary despair before hardening into resolution. This ends now. Within hours, he had executed the contingency plan he'd prepared for precisely this scenario. Legal documents transferred substantial personal assets into irrevocable trusts for both boys' education and health care. The Foundation structure was reorganized to remove any connection to White Enterprises, with funding secured through Andrew's personal holdings. Most significantly, he signed ownership of the Oakwood Community Center directly to Dreams in Motion, not as a lease or conditional arrangement, but as outright property transfer. He can't touch any of this, Andrew explained, as he presented the documentation to Channing in Isaiah's hospital room that evening. Not the medical care, not the studio space, not their educational trusts. Everything is legally isolated from white family influence. What did it cost you? Channing asked quietly, understanding the magnitude of his actions. Nothing that matters, Andrew answered simply, and everything that doesn't. The clarity of his choice, his family over wealth, authentic connection over power, love over legacy, completed the transformation Channing had been witnessing incrementally over recent weeks. This wasn't the impulsive gesture of a privileged man playing at nobility, but the culmination of deliberate, substantive action from someone who had fundamentally reordered his priorities. As they maintained their vigil beside Isaiah's bed, his condition steadily improving with each passing hour, Channing found her carefully maintained emotional boundaries dissolving. The man who had abandoned her still deserved her anger, but the father who had sacrificed everything to protect their sons from his toxic family legacy had earned something else entirely. I need to understand something, she said softly, ensuring. The sleeping twins couldn't overhear. 10 years ago, you chose your father's approval over our relationship. What's different now? Andrew considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. 10 years ago, I was terrified of disappointing everyone, my father, you, myself. I thought choosing one meant losing the other. He looked directly at her, honesty evident in his expression. Becoming a father changed that calculation completely. Some choices are absolute. Isaiah and Elijah will always come first, even if It means losing everything else, including any chance at your forgiveness. The simple truth in his statement, prioritizing their children's well-being over his own desires, even his hope for reconciliation with her, touched something Channing had protected for a decade. "And what about me?" she asked. Vulnerability, replacing her usual self-sufficiency. "Where do I fit in this new calculation?" Andrew's response held no manipulation, no pressure, just honest emotion. "You are the compass in all of this, Channing. The standard of integrity I failed once and have tried to meet ever since. Whether you ever forgive me or not, you taught me what real love looks like, putting someone else's needs above your own fears." As Isaiah stirred slightly in his sleep, they both instinctively moved closer, their hands meeting at their son's bedside. The contact, brief but electric, communicated more than words could express about their shared journey from bitter estrangement to something new and undefined, but undeniably meaningful. In that hospital room, surrounded by beeping monitors and the steady rhythm of their son's healing heart, they weren't ex-lovers or co-parents or any other limiting label. They were simply two people who had created life together, lost their way, and perhaps, just perhaps, found a new path forward through the very children who connected them across time and heartbreak. Chapter 8. Grand gestures. Isaiah's recovery progressed steadily through the first critical week. The advanced procedure developed by Dr. Townsend allowed for remarkably quick improvement, with each day revealing small but significant gains. By the 8th day, he was taking supervised walks along the pediatric floor, his determination evident in each careful step. Channing and Andrew maintained a constant presence, developing an unconscious rhythm of care. One resting while the other monitored, trading Isaiah's medication schedule and physical therapy without needing discussion. Their shared focus created a partnership that transcended their complicated past. "We're looking at discharge in 3 days if his progress continues at this rate," Dr. Townsend announced during morning rounds. "His adaptation to the procedure is exceptional, among the best I've seen in pediatric cases." "Does that mean my heart is fixed permanently?" Isaiah asked, his perceptiveness never diminished despite medication and fatigue. "The structural corrections should last a lifetime," Dr. Townsend confirmed. "You'll need monitoring through adolescence, but the intervention has effectively addressed the primary condition." The medical miracle of their son's recovery, contrasting sharply with the genetic burden that had haunted Andrew's family for generations, created profound gratitude in both parents. That evening, as Isaiah slept peacefully with steadily improving vital signs, Andrew found Channing in the small hospital garden where she occasionally retreated for moments of solitude. "Elijah called from Zora's," he said, joining her on a stone bench beneath flowering magnolias. "He's completed a full musical suite for Isaiah's homecoming. 4 movements representing diagnosis, surgery, recovery, and return." At 9 years old, Channing marveled. His music teacher says he's composing at a college level, and Isaiah's art therapist says his surgical experience drawings should be published in medical journals. Andrew added, "They're extraordinary in their anatomical accuracy and emotional insight." The shared pride in their children's unique talents created natural intimacy between them, appreciation uncompromised by the complications of their personal relationship. "I received confirmation today," Andrew continued after a comfortable silence. "The Oakwood property transfer to Dreams in Motion is complete. Your attorney should have the documentation for review." Channing turned to face him directly. "Why did you do that, Andrew? Not just arrange temporary space, but transfer ownership completely?" "Because art saved you when life was hardest," he answered simply. "And through you, it's saving children who need it most. That work deserves permanent foundation, not conditional charity." The genuine understanding of her purpose, recognizing her dance program as essential community service rather than personal hobby, touched Channing deeply. This wasn't the performative generosity of a wealthy man, but thoughtful support from someone who truly valued her mission. "My father's legal team is contesting the transfer," Andrew acknowledged with practical transparency, "but the foundation structure was specifically designed to withstand such challenges. Your ownership is secure. What about your inheritance?" Channing asked, concerned despite herself about the personal cost of his choices. "My mother's legacy was always meant for something meaningful," Andrew replied, no regret evident in his voice. "The White Fortune was built on my grandfather's ruthless real estate speculation in neighborhoods like Bronzeville. Using it to establish arts education there feels like appropriate restitution. The historical awareness and social consciousness, in his perspective, revealed depths Channing hadn't fully recognized, dimensions of understanding that had developed during their years apart. Not just personal growth, but expanded social context that aligned with values she had always held. "You've changed," she observed quietly. "I had to," Andrew replied without pretense. "The man I was couldn't face what he'd done, couldn't bear the reality of abandoning someone he loved because of fear." The simple acknowledgement that he had loved her without qualification or past. Tense hung in the air between them, neither demanding response nor seeking advantage, just honest emotion offered without expectation. Before Channing could respond, a nurse appeared at the garden entrance, calling them back to Isaiah's room. Their personal moment deferred yet again to parental responsibility, a pattern that had defined their interaction since Andrew's return. The following day, as Isaiah's discharge planning accelerated, practical questions about his recovery environment required addressing. The small apartment Channing shared with the twins presented logistical challenges for post-operative care, with its third-floor walk-up access and limited space for medical equipment. "I've prepared the guest house at the lake property," Andrew offered carefully, anticipating potential sensitivity. "Single-level access, full monitoring capabilities, separate bedrooms for privacy. Dr. Townsend has approved the setup for recovery care." Rather than the defensive response such a suggestion might have provoked weeks earlier, Channing considered the proposal with practical assessment. "That makes sense, medically," she acknowledged, "but I can't leave the studio during relocation. The children's end-of-season performance is in 3 weeks. I've arranged extended leave through August," Andrew replied, having anticipated this concern. "I can manage Isaiah's recovery care while you handle the studio transition. Elijah could split time between locations based on his preferences." The solution, respecting both her professional responsibilities and Isaiah's medical needs without demanding she choose between them, demonstrated Andrew's evolving understanding of co-parenting. Not imposing patriarchal authority or financial leverage, but offering genuine partnership that honored her multiple priorities. Isaiah, listening from his hospital bed, contributed his own perspective. "I'd like being at the lake," he said quietly. "It's peaceful for drawing, and Dad understands the monitoring equipment. The simple logic of a child, free from the emotional complications of adult relationships, clarified the practical wisdom of the arrangement." "All right," Channing agreed. "Pragmatism, overcoming lingering wariness, but it's temporary, just for recovery." The speculative hope that flickered across Andrew's face was quickly masked, but not before Channing recognized it, and her own conflicted response to the possibility of extended proximity beyond medical necessity. 3 days later, Isaiah was discharged with comprehensive home care instructions. The lake house transition proceeded with careful coordination, establishing a recovery environment that balanced medical necessities with psychological comfort. While Andrew focused on Isaiah's care, Channing divided her time between the lake house and the studio relocation, with Elijah enthusiastically accompanying her to oversee installation of his beloved keyboard in the new music room. 2 weeks into this arrangement, the pragmatic co-parenting partnership developed unexpected dimensions of domestic intimacy. Evening medical reviews evolved into extended conversations by the fireplace after the twins were asleep. Practical meal preparation became shared cooking experiences that revealed surprising compatibility. The necessary proximity of caring for their recovering son created a foundation of renewed understanding, separated from the pressures of their earlier relationship. Elijah's recital went perfectly, Channing reported one evening, returning from the city to find Andrew and Isaiah examining architectural sketches at the kitchen table. The new space has much better acoustics than the old studio. We watched. On the video link, Andrew replied, pride evident in his voice. Isaiah's been designing potential modifications to make the performance space more accessible. The drawings before them revealed sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles despite their creator's young age. Isaiah had seemingly channeled his recovery energy into creative problem-solving, developing architectural talent neither parent had anticipated. "These are remarkable," Channing observed, studying the detailed modifications for wheelchair accessibility and improved sightlines. "When did you become interested in architecture?" "Dad has books about it," Isaiah explained, his energy noticeably improved from just days earlier. "The math makes sense to me, how spaces affect how people feel." This unexpected connection between father and son, intellectual curiosity beyond genetic medical history, created another dimension of their developing family dynamic. Not just shared genetic traits, but genuine intellectual compatibility based on mutual interests. Later that night, after confirming Isaiah's midnight medication had been administered, Channing found Andrew on the lakeside deck, contemplating the water beneath a canopy of stars. "Thank you," she said, joining him at the railing, "for everything these past weeks." Andrew's smile held none of the corporate polish she had witnessed at their first reunion, replaced by genuine emotion. "I should be thanking you," he replied, "for allowing me into their lives at all." "You've been good for them," Channing acknowledged. "Honesty replacing protective criticism. Not just the financial support or medical connections, you see them, really see who they are." "They're extraordinary children," Andrew said simply. "They reflect the incredible mother who raised them." The sincerity in his voice, admiration without accompanying guilt or manipulation, created space for conversation unencumbered by their complicated history. For nearly 2 hours, they talked about the twins' development, their unique personalities, the challenges and joys Channing had experienced during years Andrew had missed. "I kept journals," she admitted quietly, detailed ones for both boys. Their milestones, funny moments, challenges. "I always thought—" She hesitated before continuing. "I thought someday they might want to know everything about their early years. Even if you never did. I would be grateful beyond words to read them," Andrew responded, raw emotion evident in his voice. "If you're willing to share that history." The simple exchange, her offering connection to what he had missed, him receiving it with appropriate reverence rather than entitled expectation, represented significant evolution in their relationship. Not erasing the past, but creating pathways to integrate it into their present understanding. As Channing turned to go inside, a sudden summer storm released torrential rain, drenching them both in seconds. Laughing at the unexpected deluge, they ran for the shelter of the covered porch, arriving breathless and soaked beneath the protective overhang. In that unguarded moment, defenses lowered by laughter and shared purpose, Andrew reached to brush Wet hair from Channing's face with instinctive tenderness, the simple contact triggered awareness that transcended co-parenting pragmatism, reminding both of the chemistry that had once connected them so powerfully. For a suspended moment, possibility hung between them like the electricity in the storm-charged air. Then Isaiah's monitor alarm sounded from inside the house, parental responsibility immediately superseding personal connection as they both rushed to their son's room. The medical alert proved minor, a disconnected sensor rather than actual distress. But the brief crisis reinforced the complexity of their situation. Emotional reconnection remained secondary to their children's well-being, personal desires appropriately deferred to parental priorities. Yet the momentary connection on the rain-swept porch had illuminated something neither could entirely ignore. Beneath the careful co-parenting coordination and growing mutual respect lay embers of attraction that 10 years of separation had failed to extinguish completely. Chapter 9. Healing Hearts. Isaiah's 1-month post-operative evaluation confirms complete success, Dr. Townsend announced during their follow-up appointment. Cardiac function has normalized, tissue integration is excellent, and all parameters indicate permanent structural correction. The official confirmation of their son's successful treatment, a medical outcome that would transform his future possibilities, created profound gratitude in both parents. As they left the hospital, matching expressions of relief and joy, replacing weeks of careful concern, Andrew found himself overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. "I need to show you something," he said impulsively as they reached the parking garage. "Both of you, if you're willing." Intrigued by his uncharacteristic spontaneity, Channing and Isaiah followed Andrew to a different section of the medical complex, a research wing bearing the White Children's Cardiac Foundation name. Inside, a laboratory hummed with activity, as scientists worked with specialized equipment. This is where Dr. Townsend's team develops the next generation of pediatric cardiac interventions, Andrew explained, his hand resting protectively on Isaiah's shoulder. "Including refinements based on data from your procedure," a researcher approached, greeting Isaiah with obvious recognition. "Our star patient. Your monitoring data has been invaluable for our pediatric protocols." "My data helps other kids?" Isaiah asked, his perceptive mind immediately grasping the implications. "Tremendously," the scientist confirmed. "Your specific case is helping us modify the procedure for even younger patients." The revelation that Isaiah's treatment contributed to broader medical advancement visibly affected him, his expression transforming as he processed this unexpected purpose within his challenging experience. "This facility," Channing said quietly to Andrew as Isaiah received a tour of the laboratory equipment, "this is what you built with your mother's inheritance." Andrew nodded, emotion evident in his usually composed features. "After my own surgery, I promised myself that if I ever had children, they wouldn't experience the same isolation and secrecy I did. When I established the foundation, I never imagined my own son would benefit from its research. The depth of his commitment, creating institutional change rather than just personal restoration, revealed dimensions of Andrew's character that extended beyond their immediate family, not just making amends for past mistakes, but transforming systemic problems that had affected generations. Later that evening, back at the lake house where Isaiah continued his recovery, Channing found herself reconsidering assumptions that had sustained her through a decade of single parenthood. The narrative she had constructed, abandonment by a privileged man, too weak to choose love over family expectation, required revision in light of Andrew's demonstrated character. The man who had committed substantial resources to medical research that benefited thousands of children, who had legally protected their son's future from toxic family influence. who had prioritized Isaiah's recovery over corporate power. This man could no longer be dismissed as merely seeking redemption for past mistakes. While Isaiah and Elijah enjoyed a movie night in the den, Channing reviewed paperwork from the Dreams in Motion relocation. The architectural modifications Isaiah had designed were being incorporated into the renovation, creating accessibility features that would expand program participation substantially. "These implementation drawings are impressive," Andrew observed, joining her at the dining table where blueprints were spread. "The contractor says Isaiah's universal design concepts exceed ADA requirements. He's talking about studying architecture now," Channing replied with maternal pride, "alongside medicine, since his experience with Dr. Townsend." "He'd excel at both," Andrew acknowledged. "His spatial reasoning skills combined with his empathy for patient experience would make him exceptional." The shared appreciation for their son's emerging talents, without competition or ownership, reflected their evolving co-parenting relationship. Not parallel paths occasionally intersecting, but integrated understanding of the children they had created together. "I've been meaning to ask," Channing said, shifting toward professional topics. "Have you resolved the White Enterprises challenge to the property transfer?" Andrew's expression revealed complex emotions beneath professional composure. "My father has withdrawn the legal challenge," he confirmed, "in exchange for my agreement not to publish certain historical documentation about the company's early development practices." "What documentation?" Channing asked, recognizing significant subtext in his carefully neutral tone. "Records from my grandfather's era," Andrew explained, "detailing predatory lending and discriminatory zoning manipulation that displaced hundreds of families from neighborhoods like Bronzeville and Woodlawn." The ethical complexity of his position, balancing historical accountability against practical, in-present needs, revealed sophisticated moral reasoning. Not simplistic right-wrong dichotomies, but nuanced understanding of competing values within complex systems. "Was that the right choice?" Channing asked, genuinely interested in his reasoning, rather than offering judgment. "I don't know," Andrew admitted with honest vulnerability. "The documentation is preserved in trust, with release provisions after my father's lifetime. The immediate need was securing the studio's future without protracted litigation that might affect programming." This willingness to acknowledge uncertainty, to present complex decisions without defensive justification, continued Andrew's pattern of authentic relationship rather than performative perfection. Not positioning himself as flawless savior, but as someone making thoughtful choices within complicated circumstances. Their conversation continued past midnight, evolving from practical co-parenting coordination to deeper exploration of personal values and professional aspirations. Andrew described his vision for community development initiatives beyond medical research, while Channing shared dreams for expanding dance education into academic partnerships. "You never lost your idealism," Andrew observed as their discussion reached a natural pause. "Despite everything, you maintained commitment to creating change through arts education." "It wasn't always easy," Channing acknowledged, allowing rare vulnerability. "There were nights I questioned everything, whether dance programs really mattered against systemic inequities, whether I was shortchanging the boys by pursuing both motherhood and professional purpose." "You weren't," Andrew said, with quiet certainty. "Your commitment to both showed them that passion and responsibility aren't mutually exclusive." The validation, specific to her actual values rather than generic platitudes, touched something Channing had protected through years of independence, not just romantic appreciation, but recognition of her core identity as both mother and professional change-maker. As dawn approached, their conversation having traversed territory from pragmatic planning to philosophical reflection, Channing found herself regarding Andrew with evolved perspective. The initial framework through which she had viewed his return, suspicious of manipulation, resistant to emotional engagement, no longer aligned with consistent evidence of his authentic transformation. "I should check on Isaiah before grabbing some sleep," Andrew said, noting the early hour. "His 6 a.m. medication is due soon." "I can handle it," Channing offered, their co-parenting coordination now instinctive rather than negotiated. "You've taken the past 3 nights. Standing to leave, Andrew paused beside her chair, momentary hesitation revealing uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Thank you," he said softly, "for allowing me this time with all of you. Whatever happens next, these weeks have been healing." The simple gratitude, acknowledging temporary connection without presuming permanent resolution, reflected emotional maturity that contrasted sharply with the young man who had once abandoned her. Not entitled expectation, but appreciation for whatever relationship she felt comfortable offering. As he turned to go, Channing made a spontaneous decision that surprised even herself. Rising from her chair, she caught his hand, the physical contact sending familiar electricity through both of them. "Andrew," she said quietly, meeting his startled gaze directly, "I've been thinking about something you said at the hospital. About changing because you had to. About not being able to bear what you'd done." He nodded, attentive focus entirely on her words rather than anticipating outcomes. "I think I understand that now," Channing continued, "because I've had to change too, to see beyond the narrative I constructed about us, to recognize that the man standing before me isn't the same one who left 10 years ago." Andrew remained silent, allowing her space to express complex emotions without interruption. Another evolution from the young man who had once filled uncomfortable silences with impulsive words. "I needed to hate you," she admitted with raw honesty. "To protect myself, to explain an inexplicable abandonment, to justify the walls I built. But watching you with our sons, seeing your integrity, your commitment, your willingness to sacrifice everything for their well-being, I can't maintain that necessary hatred anymore." "I don't expect forgiveness," Andrew responded, his voice rough with emotion, "only the chance to be present for Isaiah and Elijah." "That's why forgiveness is possible," Channing replied softly. "Because you didn't return demanding it, you earned it through consistent action rather than convenient words." The weight of this admission, a decade of protective anger gradually transformed through witnessed evidence, created profound intimacy between them. Not erasing painful history, but acknowledging its integration into something new and potentially stronger. Without conscious thought, Channing moved closer, her free hand rising to touch Andrew's face with tentative exploration. The contact, initiated by her rather than him, represented significant surrender of defensive distance maintained since his return. When their lips met, the connection transcended physical attraction, communicating emotional recognition that words couldn't adequately express. Not impulsive passion or convenient proximity, but conscious choice to explore renewed possibility despite acknowledged risk. The kiss deepened with remembered familiarity and discovered newness, honoring their history while acknowledging their evolution into different people than those who had loved and lost a decade earlier. When they finally separated, breathless and vulnerable, Andrew rested his forehead against hers with reverent restraint. "I don't want to presume," he whispered, "or rush whatever this might become." "Neither do I," Channing agreed, appreciating his restraint rather than interpreting it as rejection. "The boys have to remain our priority." Their mutual acknowledgement of parental responsibility, placing children's well-being above personal desires, created foundation for authentic relationship rather than impulsive reconnection, Not dramatic passion, but mindful exploration of possibility with appropriate consideration of broader impact. As dawn light filtered through lakehouse windows, they moved together toward Isaiah's room for his scheduled medication, their hands remaining intertwined in silent acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted between them. Not erasing complicated history or guaranteeing uncomplicated future, but opening space for authentic connection beyond co-parenting necessity. The kiss on the landing represented neither magical resolution nor guaranteed outcome, but conscious choice to risk vulnerability again, with eyes wide open to both potential joy and possible pain. Not fairy tale reunion, but mature recognition that love requires courage precisely because its value justifies its risk. Chapter 10. Twice Promised, Forever Kept. 3 months after Isaiah's successful surgery, the newly renovated Bronzeville Arts Center prepared for its grand opening gala. The historic building had been transformed into Dreams in Motion's permanent home, complete with professional dance studios, community performance space, and educational facilities that would serve hundreds of neighborhood children. "Mum, come see!" Elijah called excitedly from the newly installed sound booth. "The acoustic treatments make everything sound amazing." Channing smiled at her son's enthusiasm as she completed final preparations for the evening's showcase performance. The renovation had incorporated both twins' contributions, Elijah's acoustic engineering suggestions alongside Isaiah's accessibility designs, creating a facility that reflected their growing expertise. "You look beautiful," Andrew observed quietly, appearing in the doorway of her office. "Nervous about tonight?" "A little," she admitted, smoothing the emerald gown she'd chosen for the occasion. "The mayor's attending, along with potential programs, funders. They'll be impressed," Andrew assured her, his confidence based on substantive understanding rather than empty reassurance. The curriculum integration with public schools alone justifies expanded support. Their conversation reflected the evolved relationship they had developed over recent months, professional respect and personal connection interwoven without conflict. The cautious romantic exploration begun during Isaiah's recovery had progressed. With deliberate consideration, each step taken with conscious awareness of potential impact on their children. "Isaiah's cardiac checkup results came back," Andrew added, his expression revealing good news before his words confirmed it. "All parameters, completely normal. Dr. Townsend says he can resume full physical activity without restrictions." The milestone, their son's heart finally functioning without limitation, represented culmination of their shared medical journey. From genetic burden to liberating cure, Isaiah's condition had transformed from family secret to scientific advancement. That would benefit countless children. As evening approached, guests began arriving for the gala opening. Community members mingled with foundation representatives, arts administrators, with neighborhood children's families, diverse constituencies united by shared recognition of arts education's transformative potential. Channing. Dr. Michaels, the school district superintendent, approached with evident enthusiasm. "The curriculum integration proposal is brilliant. The board has unanimously approved implementation for the upcoming semester." "That's wonderful news," Channing replied, professional satisfaction evident in her expression. The achievement, institutional recognition of arts education's academic value, represented years of persistent advocacy, finally reaching fruition. Throughout the evening, Channing navigated social connections with natural grace, her passionate articulation of educational vision impressing potential funders and community partners alike. Andrew observed with admiration from a respectful distance, providing support without overshadowing her professional accomplishment. The showcase performance featured students from Dreams in Motion's various programs, including several from the new adaptive dance initiative inspired by Isaiah's accessibility designs. As young dancers of diverse abilities shared the stage with professional company members, the audience responded with genuine appreciation for both technical skill and inclusive vision. "Your mother is remarkable," Andrew told the twins as they watched from reserved seats. "She's built something extraordinary here." "With your help," Isaiah observed perceptively. "You make a good team." The simple assessment, from a child's perspective, yet containing profound insight, caused both twins to exchange knowing glances. Their parents' evolving relationship hadn't escaped their notice, despite Andrew and Channing's attempts at discretion during its developmental stages. When the performance concluded to standing ovation, Channing joined her students on stage for well-deserved recognition. The moment represented professional culmination of vision she had maintained through incredibly challenging circumstances, a dream sustained during years when practical obstacles might have justified abandonment. During the reception that followed, Andrew found himself approached by Harrison White, his first direct contact with his father since their corporate confrontation months earlier. "Impressive facility," Harrison observed, with characteristic analytical assessment. "The White name appears nowhere on the building despite obvious financial involvement." "That was intentional," Andrew replied evenly. "This is Channing's achievement, not a vanity project for family legacy enhancement." Harrison studied his son with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. "You've changed," he finally said, neither approval nor criticism evident in his tone. "I had to," Andrew replied simply. Before further conversation developed, Elijah appeared at Andrew's side, excitement overriding his usual wariness around his grandfather. "Dad, Isaiah's going to perform the piece we created together. Come see!" The automatic response to his son's request, immediately excusing himself from his father without seeking permission or approval, demonstrated Andrew's transformed priorities more clearly than any verbal declaration could have. Parental engagement, taking unconditional precedence over white family hierarchy, represented complete inversion of values Harrison had instilled throughout Andrew's youth. In the main performance space, Isaiah sat at the grand piano while student dancers took positions on stage. The collaboration between the twins, Isaiah's newly composed music performed live while dancers executed Elijah's choreography, represented creative partnership that transcended individual talent. As the piece unfolded, its narrative became clear, a musical and movement journey depicting Isaiah's cardiac experience from diagnosis through recovery. Not traumatic recounting but transformed understanding. Medical challenge reimagined as artistic expression that created meaning from difficulty. The profound emotional intelligence evident in the twins' creation, technical sophistication combined with empathetic insight, moved the audience to tears. When the final notes faded, the brothers shared a moment of simple acknowledgement before accepting thunderous applause with modest composure. "They're extraordinary," Channing whispered, having appeared at Andrew's side during the performance. "Beyond anything I could have imagined. They've always been extraordinary," Andrew replied softly. "But having both of us support different dimensions of who they are has allowed them to flourish in new ways." The observation, acknowledging complementary parental strengths rather than competitive comparison, reflected their evolved understanding of family dynamics, not single-parent heroism or father-savior narrative, but integrated support system that honored each child's multifaceted development. As the evening concluded, the twins departed for an overnight stay with Zora, leaving Channing and Andrew alone at the lake house that had become their shared residence during recent months. The gradual domestic integration had progressed with careful consideration, separate bedrooms maintained, while common spaces evolved into harmonious shared territory. "Tonight was everything I hoped for the center," Channing reflected as they walked along the moonlit shore. Community engagement, educational validation, artistic excellence, everything Dreams in Motion was created to embody. "You've built something remarkable," Andrew acknowledged with genuine admiration. "Something that will transform children's lives for generations." The comfortable silence that followed reflected their relationship's evolution, communication that no longer required constant verbal reassurance or performative validation. Mutual understanding developed through shared purpose and consistent presence rather than dramatic declaration. "I've been thinking about something," Andrew said as they reached the small dock extending into calm waters. "About time and second chances and what we build from broken pieces." He turned to face Channing directly, moonlight illuminating his expression with vulnerable intensity. 10 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life, choosing fear over love and causing pain I can never fully repair. The man I was then doesn't deserve forgiveness or second chances." Channing began to speak, but Andrew continued with gentle determination. "But standing here tonight, I'm not asking for that man's redemption. I'm asking if the person I've become, the father who loves his sons beyond reason, the man who has tried to live with integrity and purpose, might have space in your future, as more than co-parent or complicated history." From his pocket, he withdrew not an extravagant diamond as he had a decade earlier, but a simple band of intertwined metals, gold, silver, and copper, woven into complex pattern. "This isn't the ring I gave you before," he said softly, "because we're not the people we were then. It's something new, created from different elements that are stronger together than separately." The symbolism, thoughtful rather than expensive, representing evolved understanding rather than materialism, reflected genuine transformation in values and perception. "I'm not asking for immediate answers or dramatic gestures," Andrew continued, his vulnerability evident beneath composed exterior. "Only permission to love you openly, to build whatever relationship feels right for all of us, without predetermined expectations or artificial timelines." Channing studied him in the moonlight, seeing clearly both the man he had been and the one he had become, not separate identities, but integrated evolution through painful growth and conscious choice. "I used to dream about this moment," she confessed quietly. "During those first terrible years alone with the twins, I imagined you returning, begging forgiveness, me being strong enough to reject you completely." Andrew nodded, accepting her honesty without defensive response. "But standing here now," Channing continued, "those fantasies feel hollow compared to what we've actually built together. Co-parenting partnership, professional respect, friendship that acknowledges our history without being imprisoned by it." She took the ring from his palm, examining its intricate pattern with appreciative understanding. "This isn't about erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen. It's about creating something new that honors everything. The pain and joy, the separation and reunion, the growth we both needed to experience separately before finding each other again." "Exactly," Andrew confirmed, hope carefully moderated in his expression. Rather than dramatic acceptance or rejection, Channing closed her hand around the ring with thoughtful consideration. "I'm not ready to wear this yet," she said honestly, "but I am ready to continue building whatever we're becoming, with open eyes and careful attention to what our sons need from both of us." The measured response, neither romantic fantasy nor protective rejection, reflected emotional maturity that honored both lingering caution and growing connection. Not fairy tale resolution, but authentic relationship developing at appropriate pace with proper consideration. "That's more than I deserve," Andrew acknowledged with genuine gratitude, "and everything I hope for." Their kiss beneath moonlight contained both remembered history and discovered present, familiar chemistry, now informed by earned trust and proven commitment. Not impulsive passion, but conscious choice to explore connection with full awareness of both potential joy and responsibility. As they walked back toward the house, hands intertwined in comfortable silence, Channing realized the narrative she had constructed about their relationship required final revision. The story wasn't tragedy or fairy tale, abandonment or rescue, villain and victim, but complex human journey of flawed people finding their way towards something authentic through both mistake and redemption. The ring remained in her pocket rather than on her finger, a promise considered rather than immediately accepted. The proper timing would reveal itself through continued evidence rather than dramatic gesture. Their twice-promised hearts would proceed with appropriate care precisely because they understood love's value and vulnerability from experience rather than idealized imagination. 6 months later, on the anniversary of Isaiah's successful surgery, Channing finally placed the ring on her finger during a private family celebration at the lake house. Not public spectacle or social statement, but quiet commitment witnessed by the sons who had brought them back together. "Does this mean you're getting married?" Elijah asked with characteristic directness. "It means we're building our family intentionally," Channing explained, her fingers intertwined with Andrew's, "with complete awareness of our history and commitment to our future." "Like my heart," Isaiah observed with perceptive insight. "Fixed, stronger than before because of what it went through. The wisdom in their son's simple metaphor, understanding that healing creates specific strength precisely where breaking occurred, perfectly encapsulated their journey from separation to reunion. Not despite their painful history, but because of it, they had developed capacity for relationship based on authenticity rather than idealization." That evening, after the twins had gone to sleep, Andrew and Channing stood together on the lake house, porch beneath stars that had witnessed their evolution from bitter estrangement to chosen partnership. Not perfect resolution erasing complicated history, but intentional integration of past experience into present understanding. "Thank you," Andrew said softly, his arm around Channing's shoulders as they contemplated the peaceful waters. "For the second chance I never deserved, but will spend every day honoring." "We both received second chances," Channing corrected gently. "I was so afraid of being hurt again that I nearly rejected the possibility of something extraordinary for all of us." Their embrace beneath starlight represented not happily ever after fantasy, but conscious commitment to building something authentic together. A twice-promised love made stronger through breaking and rebuilding, through separation and reunion, through the challenging, imperfect, beautiful work of genuine connection. Not perfect resolution, but perfect commitment to continuing the journey together, with eyes wide open, hearts carefully tended, and the family they had created at the center of everything.